The first time I saw Monica, she was wearing this deep green sweater that matched her eyes. She had a presence. Sharp, confident, with this way of making you feel like you were the only one in the room when she spoke to you. We met through mutual friends at a coffee shop. It wasn't a big group outing or anything, just a quiet gathering to catch up over lattes and share updates. Monica had just finished a big project at work and was glowing from the praise she'd received. She was a project manager who loved the challenge of deadlines and organizing chaos into order. "There's something satisfying about fixing problems no one else can untangle," she said with a smile, swirling her coffee like she was deep in thought. I was smitten. She had this energy, like she was going somewhere in life, and it was infectious. By the time the evening ended, I couldn't stop thinking about her. A week later, I asked for her number through a mutual friend, and when we went on our first date, I was sure I'd met someone special. We dated for 2 years. It was steady, not like the whirlwind romances you see in movies, but comforting. She loved how I always had a plan. If it rained, I'd already picked a backup restaurant. If she had a bad day, I'd have flowers waiting by the time she got home. Monica would call me her rock, and I liked that. When we decided to get married, it felt like the next natural step. She said she loved how I brought balance to her chaotic world, how my steady nature made her feel grounded. But looking back, I wonder if she mistook stability for predictability, or worse, monotony. It wasn't all bad, especially at first. We had our little routines. Friday night takeout from the same sushi place, lazy Saturday mornings watching cooking shows, Sunday afternoon walks in the park when the weather wasn't too brutal. She'd sip her wine in the evenings, talking about her dreams of traveling or how she wanted to renovate our place. But there were cracks I didn't see then. Or maybe I didn't want to see them. Sometimes, she'd bring up an ex-boyfriend, this guy she called Nate. The way she talked about him was confusing. She'd criticize him for being unreliable or reckless, but there was this undercurrent in her voice, like she missed something about him. One night after dinner, as we cleaned up, she paused while drying a plate and said, "Ethan, do you ever feel like we're stuck? Like life is just the same thing over and over?" I glanced at her, unsure where this was coming from. "Stuck how?" "I don't know," she said, frowning a little. "Like maybe we're too safe. Does that make sense?" "Safe is good, right?" I replied, trying to keep my tone light. She laughed, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I guess." She didn't say more, and I let it slide. Over time, her girls' nights became more frequent. Monica had a tight-knit group of friends she'd known since college, and they'd often meet for wine and conversation. I didn't mind. I figured she needed the social time. But one night, everything unraveled. I was home, working on a report for work. The apartment was quiet except for their laughter echoing from the next room. I wasn't eavesdropping, at least not at first. But I'd left my laptop charger in there, and when I walked in to grab it, I overheard Monica's voice, clear as day. "I don't know," she was saying, her words slurring slightly from the wine. "I mean, Ethan's great. He's dependable, kind, safe. But sometimes I wonder if I settled. Nate was." Her voice trailed off, but it was enough. I froze, my hand tightening around the charger cord. I felt a chill crawl down my back, like the room had suddenly dropped 10 degrees. My chest tightened, and for a moment, I thought I might just walk in and confront her right there. But I didn't. Instead, I walked out, the sound of their laughter ringing in my ears. I don't remember much of what I did after I left the room. My hands were shaking as I plugged my laptop in, and my mind was racing. I tried to focus on my report, but her words kept looping in my head. "Sometimes I wonder if I settled." It wasn't the kind of thing you could unhear. I spent the next hour pretending to work, but my eyes never left the clock. I waited for her friends to leave, listening for the telltale sounds of wine glasses clinking, chairs scraping the floor, and the soft murmur of goodbyes. When the front door finally closed and I heard Monica's footsteps heading toward the bedroom, I followed. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, scrolling through her phone, her face flushed from the wine. "Did you have fun tonight?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. She glanced up, startled. "Yeah. It was nice to catch up with the girls." "Why?" "No reason," I replied, sitting down on the other side of the bed. For a moment, I thought about saying something, about telling her what I'd overheard. But the words caught in my throat. Instead, I just stared at the wall, letting the silence stretch between us. Monica broke it first. "You're being weird," she said, tilting her head to look at me. "Is something wrong?" I hesitated, then shook my head. "No, I'm fine." But I wasn't. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured her sitting with her friends, laughing and talking about how I was safe. It made me question everything. Our marriage, our relationship, even the way she looked at me. The next few days were tense, at least for me. Monica didn't seem to notice. She went about her routine like nothing had happened, while I was left dissecting every interaction we'd ever had. I started to wonder if I'd missed other signs, other moments when she'd hinted at her unhappiness. That weekend, we had plans to go to dinner with some friends of mine. Just a casual outing at a local steakhouse. Monica dressed up more than usual, wearing this black dress that hugged her figure and a pair of heels I hadn't seen in years. She looked stunning, but I couldn't shake the thought that maybe she wasn't dressing up for me. At the restaurant, I caught her checking her phone a few times, her thumb scrolling rapidly as if she were looking for something specific. "Everything okay?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. "Yeah," she said, slipping her phone back into her purse. "Just work stuff." I wanted to believe her, but my gut told me otherwise. The evening dragged on, and while everyone else laughed and enjoyed themselves, I felt like an outsider at my own table. Monica was charming as always, making conversation and throwing in witty comments that had everyone laughing. But every time she smiled, I wondered if it was genuine or just a mask she wore to hide the cracks I'd glimpsed. On the drive home, I couldn't keep it in any longer. "Do you ever feel like we're not enough for each other?" I asked, my hands tightening on the steering wheel. Monica glanced at me, her brow furrowing. "What? Where's this coming from?" I hesitated, my stomach knotting. "I don't know. Just something I've been thinking about." She sighed, leaning back in her seat. "Ethan, we're fine. You're overthinking again. You always do that." Her words stung, but I let the conversation drop. That night, after she fell asleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with questions I couldn't answer. Was I just paranoid? Or was there something deeper going on, something I wasn't ready to face yet? One thing was clear: whatever stability I thought we had, it was starting to crack. By Monday, I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. Her words haunted me, and the unease gnawed at my chest like an itch I couldn't scratch. I needed to confront her, not angrily, not accusingly, but I couldn't let this fester. That evening, I found her in the kitchen, her back to me as she sliced vegetables for dinner. She had the radio on, humming softly along to a pop song. It was such a normal scene, so domestic, and for a second, I almost chickened out. But I didn't. "Monica," I said, keeping my voice steady. She turned, the knife still in her hand. "What's up?" "We need to talk," I said, sitting at the table and gesturing for her to join me. Her smile faltered, but she set the knife down and came over, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Okay, what's going on?" I hesitated, suddenly unsure how to start. "The other night, during your girls' night, I overheard something." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "What do you mean?" "I was getting my charger," I said quickly. "I wasn't eavesdropping, but I heard you say, you wondered if you'd settled." Her face froze, her lips parting slightly as if she wanted to deny it but couldn't. The silence stretched between us until she finally looked away, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of the towel. "I didn't mean it like that," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then how did you mean it?" I asked, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. She sighed, leaning back in her chair. "I don't know, Ethan. I was just venting." We'd had a few glasses of wine, and I was feeling, I don't know, reflective. "Reflective about what?" I pressed. "About us." She didn't answer right away, which felt like an answer in itself. "I love you," she said finally, looking me in the eye. "You're my husband, and I chose you for a reason. But sometimes I wonder if I've lost a part of myself along the way. Does that make sense?" I stared at her, struggling to process her words. "Lost a part of yourself how?" Monica shrugged, her gaze dropping to the table. "Before we got married, I had all these ideas about what my life would look like. Traveling, trying new things, meeting new people. And now Now everything feels so predictable. It's not about you, Ethan. It's about me. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to argue, to tell her that predictability wasn't a bad thing, that it was the foundation of a stable life. But deep down, I knew she wouldn't hear it, not the way I meant it. "Do you regret marrying me?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock. "No, of course not. But you wonder if you settled." She flinched, like the words physically hurt her. "That's not what I meant, Ethan." Then what did you mean?" I interrupted, my frustration bubbling to the surface. "Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you think you made a mistake." Monica's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away, her jaw tightening. "I don't know what you want me to say. I'm being honest with you because you asked. Isn't that what you wanted?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. The rest of the night was a blur. Dinner was quiet and awkward, with both of us avoiding each other's eyes. Afterward, she went to bed early, leaving me alone in the living room to stew in my thoughts. 4 hours, I sat there, replaying our conversation in my head. I told myself that honesty was a good thing, that we could work through this if we tried. But the truth was, I wasn't sure anymore. When I finally climbed into bed, Monica was already asleep, her back turned to me. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, and wondered if things would ever feel the same again. Over the next few weeks, things between Monica and me felt strained, like we were walking on eggshells around each other. We didn't fight exactly, but there was a distance, an invisible wall that neither of us seemed willing to break through. She kept herself busy with work and her friends, spending more evenings out than usual. Networking, she called it, though it often seemed more like an escape. I tried not to read too much into it, convincing myself that I was overthinking again. But every time she left, I felt that same knot in my stomach tightening, like the ground beneath me was slowly shifting. One evening, I decided to plan a date night. Something simple to bring us back to where we used to be. I made reservations at the little Italian place where we'd gone on one of our first dates, thinking maybe some nostalgia would help. When I told her, she hesitated. "This Friday?" she asked, her brow furrowing. "Yeah," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "I figured it'd be nice to spend some time together, just the two of us." She hesitated again, biting her lip. "I think I might have something with the girls that night. Let me check and get back to you, okay?" I nodded, forcing a smile, but deep down, I already knew what her answer would be. Sure enough, Friday came, and Monica texted me from work. "Sorry, babe. Can we rain check tonight? I forgot about Sarah's thing." I didn't respond. Instead, I spent the evening on the couch, staring at the untouched takeout I'd ordered, trying to convince myself that it didn't mean anything. People get busy. Plans change. It didn't have to mean she was pulling away, even if that's exactly what it felt like. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. I'd gone to bed early, exhausted from a long day at work. Monica was still up, sitting on the couch with her laptop, typing away on something she said was for work. Around midnight, I woke up thirsty and went to the kitchen for a glass of water. That's when I saw it. Monica's laptop was open, and on the screen was a message thread. The name at the top wasn't familiar. A guy named Greg. I wouldn't have thought much of it, but the message she just sent made my stomach drop. "It's just nice to talk to someone who gets it, you know?" I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to look away, to give her the benefit of the doubt, but my eyes scanned the earlier messages before I could stop myself. "Greg, you're too good for him, you know that? If you were mine, I'd never let you feel this way. Monica, stop, LOL. You're sweet, but it's not like that." There it was again, that word, safe. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "Ethan?" Her voice startled me, and I turned to see her standing in the hallway, her expression guarded. She'd clearly seen me looking at the screen. "What is this?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She crossed her arms, her posture defensive. "It's just a friend. Someone I talk to sometimes. It's not a big deal." "Not a big deal?" I echoed, my voice rising. "You're telling some guy I don't even know about our marriage? About me? You're overreacting," she snapped. "It's not like I'm cheating on you." I laughed bitterly, running a hand through my hair. Well, you've got a funny way of showing it. Her eyes flashed with anger. I needed someone to talk to, Ethan. Someone who wouldn't judge me or make me feel like I'm failing at everything. Failing? I repeated, stunned. Failing at what? She didn't answer right away, her gaze dropping to the floor. At being happy, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how to explain it. I feel stuck, Ethan. And I don't know how to get out of it. Her words cut deeper than I thought possible. I wanted to yell to demand answers, but instead, I just stood there, staring at her. Do you even want to be married to me anymore? I asked, my voice trembling. Her silence was deafening. After that night, something in our marriage shifted. Something I couldn't quite put into words. Monica and I stopped arguing, but it wasn't because things were better. It was like we both decided, without saying it, that there wasn't much left to fight for. She still went through the motions of being my wife. She'd ask about my day, laugh at my jokes, and even kiss me goodnight, but there was an emptiness to it all, like she was playing a role she no longer believed in. I probably wasn't any better. I found myself withdrawing, saying less, asking less. The silence between us became its own language, and we both spoke it fluently. I started staying late at work, taking on extra projects just to avoid coming home. When I did, I'd find her curled up on the couch, her laptop perched on her knees, the glow from the screen highlighting the faint lines of stress on her face. I didn't ask who she was talking to, and she didn't offer. One evening, as I was pulling into the driveway, I saw her standing by the living room window, staring out at nothing. She didn't see me, but something about the way she looked, so lost, so far away, made my chest tighten. I parked the car and sat there for a moment, my hands gripping the steering wheel. I wanted to go inside, to wrap my arms around her and tell her we could fix this. But another part of me, the part that still stung from her words, from the messages with Greg, held me back. Instead, I stayed in the car, watching her until she finally turned away from the window. The next morning, Monica told me she was heading out of town for the weekend. A girl's trip, she said, her voice light and casual. I nodded, trying to keep my expression neutral. Sounds fun. She hesitated, like she wanted to say more, but then she just kissed me on the cheek and left. That weekend, the house felt impossibly quiet. I spent most of it cleaning, organizing the garage, scrubbing the kitchen, anything to keep my mind off the growing void between us. By Sunday evening, when she still wasn't back, I found myself sitting at the dining room table, staring at my phone. It wasn't that I didn't trust her. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. But when I opened her Instagram and saw a photo of her and two women I didn't recognize, all smiling in front of a beachside bar, I couldn't help but wonder if Greg was somewhere just out of frame. The thought gnawed at me all night. When Monica finally came home late Sunday, I was still awake, sitting in the living room with a book I hadn't actually been reading. She smiled when she saw me, dropping her bag by the door. "Hey," she said, kicking off her shoes. "You're up late." "Couldn't sleep," I replied, setting the book aside. She walked over and sat down beside me, close enough that I could smell the faint trace of her perfume. "The trip was nice," she said, her tone breezy. "We should go to the beach sometime. Just the two of us." Her suggestion caught me off guard. For a second, I almost believed she meant it. "Maybe," I said, not fully committing. She tilted her head, studying me. "You okay?" I nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah. Just tired." She reached out and took my hand, her fingers warm against mine. "I know things have been off lately," she said quietly. "But I want us to be okay, Ethan. I really do." For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. "I want that too," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But even as I said it, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that we were already too far gone. That night, as she slept beside me, I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling. I kept thinking about her words. "I want us to be okay." What I didn't know was that, okay wasn't the same as happy. The following weeks were a slow unraveling, like watching a thread being pulled from the fabric of our lives one tug at a time. Monica and I went through the motions, work, dinners, weekends, but the rhythm felt forced, like a song played out of tune. She was more distant, spending hours on her phone or laptop, always quick to close it when I entered the room. I told myself it was work, but I couldn't shake the image of Greg's name on her screen. One Friday, I decided to come home early from work. I told myself it was to surprise Monica, but deep down, I think I was hoping to catch her off guard, to see what she did when she thought I wasn't around. When I walked through the door, the house was quiet except for the faint sound of music playing from the bedroom. I set my bag down and made my way down the hall, my heart pounding with every step. The door was ajar, and as I pushed it open, I saw Monica sitting on the edge of the bed, her phone in her hand. She was smiling, this soft, private smile that I hadn't seen in months. "Hey," I said, stepping into the room. She jumped, her smile vanishing as she quickly locked her phone and set it face down on the nightstand. "Ethan, you're home early." "Yeah," I said, trying to sound casual. "Thought I'd surprise you." Her eyes darted to the phone, then back to me. "That's nice. I was just relaxing." I nodded, my gaze lingering on the phone. "Who were you texting?" Her smile faltered, and she hesitated just a moment too long. "Oh, no one. Just Sarah. We were talking about plans for next weekend." I wanted to believe her, but something about her tone, the way her eyes wouldn't quite meet mine, made my stomach twist. "That's good," I said, forcing a smile. "You should relax." She nodded, standing up and brushing past me. "I'm going to start dinner," she said over her shoulder. I stayed in the bedroom for a few minutes, staring at the phone on the nightstand. I wasn't the type to snoop, but the temptation was almost unbearable. If I picked it up, if I looked, would it confirm everything I was afraid of? Or would it just make me feel worse? In the end, I left it alone. Dinner that night was strained. Monica talked about her day, filling the silence with stories about her coworkers and a new project she was leading, but I barely heard her. My mind was stuck on the image of her smile, so warm, so genuine, and the fact that it hadn't been for me. Later, as we cleaned up, I couldn't stop myself. "Monica," I said, my voice careful. "Are you happy?" She paused, a plate in her hands, and looked at me. "What kind of question is that?" "I'm just asking," I said, leaning against the counter. "Are you happy with us?" "With me?" Her expression softened, but there was something guarded in her eyes. "Ethan, of course I'm happy." "Why would you even ask that?" "Because sometimes it doesn't feel like it," I admitted, my chest tightening as I spoke. She set the plate down and walked over to me, placing her hands on my arms. "Ethan," she said, her voice gentle. "I'm here, aren't I? I'm not going anywhere." Her words should have been reassuring, but they weren't. They felt hollow, like she was saying what she thought I wanted to hear. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, and she leaned up to kiss me on the cheek before going back to the dishes. That night, as we lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling, wondering how much longer we could keep pretending. The cracks in our marriage were growing wider, and I didn't know if we could patch them up, or if Monica even wanted to. It was a Thursday evening when everything finally came to light. I'd been working late on a project at the office, trying to distract myself from the growing void at home. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was dark except for the faint glow coming from the living room window. Monica was sitting on the couch when I walked in, her legs tucked under her and her laptop balanced on her knees. She looked up as the door closed behind me, and for a moment, I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt, maybe. "You're home late," she said, her tone light but a little too casual. "Yeah," I replied, setting my bag down. "Long day." She nodded, her gaze dropping back to her laptop. I stood there for a moment, watching her, feeling the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air. "Monica," I said finally, my voice steady. "We need to talk." She looked up again, her brows knitting together. "About what?" I gestured to the couch. "Can you close your laptop? Just for a minute." She hesitated, her fingers hovering over the keyboard, but then she sighed and set it aside. "Okay," she said, folding her hands in her lap. "What's on your mind?" I sat down in the armchair across from her, my heart pounding in my chest. "I feel like there's been a distance between us," I said carefully. "And I think we both know it's not just in my head." Monica frowned, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Ethan, if this is about the other night—" "It's not just the other night," I interrupted. "It's everything. The way you've been pulling away, the time you spend on your phone, the things you've said." I hesitated, then took a deep breath. "I need to know the truth, Monica. Is there someone else? Her eyes widened, and for a second, I thought she might deny it. But then her shoulders slumped, and she let out a long, shaky breath. It's not what you think, she said softly, her voice trembling. Then what is it? I asked, my voice rising despite myself. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been sharing parts of yourself with someone else. Parts that are supposed to be mine. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them away, her jaw tightening. I never slept with him, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I swear, Ethan. It was just talking. That's all it ever was. I felt a strange mix of relief and anger wash over me. Relief that she hadn't crossed that line, and anger that she'd come so close. Greg, I said, the name feeling like acid on my tongue. It's him, isn't it? She flinched, and that was all the confirmation I needed. How long? I asked, my voice steady but cold. Monica looked down at her hands, her fingers twisting together. A few months, she admitted. We met at a networking event, and he just listened. He made me feel like I wasn't alone. Alone, I repeated, my hands curling into fists. You're married to me, Monica. How could you possibly feel alone? Her head snapped up, her eyes flashing with anger. Because you don't see me anymore, Ethan, she shot back. All you care about is work, schedules, plans. You don't even notice when I'm struggling. Her words stung, but I wasn't about to let her turn this around on me. So instead of talking to me, you confide in him? I said, my voice rising. Do you have any idea how that makes me feel? She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Instead, she buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking as she started to cry. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her we could fix this, but the hurt was too fresh, too raw. Instead, I stood up, pacing the room as I tried to gather my thoughts. I don't know what to do with this, I said finally, my voice breaking. I don't know how to come back from this. Monica looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. I don't either, she whispered. And in that moment, I realized that maybe neither of us truly wanted to. The house felt unbearably silent the next day. Monica stayed in the bedroom most of the morning, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that went cold before I took a sip. I kept replaying her words from the night before. I don't know how to come back from this. The worst part was, I believed her. Around noon, she finally emerged, her face pale and her eyes red-rimmed. She avoided looking at me as she poured herself a glass of water and leaned against the counter. I think we should talk, she said softly, her voice barely audible over the hum of the refrigerator. I set my coffee cup down, my hands tightening into fists under the table. About what? She glanced at me, then away. About what happens next. My heart sank. What do you mean? Monica hesitated, chewing on her bottom lip. I think we need some space, she said finally, to figure out what we really want. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Space, I repeated, the word tasting bitter. You mean separation? She nodded slowly. Just for a little while. I need to clear my head, Ethan. I need to figure out who I am and what I want. What about what I want? I asked, my voice rising despite myself. What about our marriage? Our life together? I'm not saying it's over, she said quickly, her hands raised like she was trying to calm a storm. I don't know if I can fix this while we're living under the same roof. I stared at her, my chest tightening with a mix of anger and despair. So what? You're just going to leave? She looked down, her fingers gripping the edge of the counter. I think it's for the best, she said softly. For both of us. I wanted to yell, to argue, to beg her to stay, but I couldn't bring myself to say the words. Instead, I stood up, pushing my chair back with a scrape. Fine, I said, my voice cold and distant. Do whatever you think you need to do. Monica flinched at my tone, but she didn't argue. Over the next few days, she began packing her things, slowly filling a suitcase with clothes and personal items. Watching her go through the motions was like living in a bad dream, one I couldn't wake up from. The night before she left, we sat in silence on opposite ends of the couch, the TV on but neither of us watching it. Ethan, she said finally, breaking the silence. I'm sorry. I glanced at her, my jaw tightening. For what? For everything, she said, her voice trembling. For hurting you, for letting things get this bad. I never wanted it to end up like this. Her words felt hollow, like they were meant to absolve her guilt more than to comfort me. I hope you find what you're looking for, I said, not bothering to hide the bitterness in my voice. She didn't respond. The next morning, she was gone before I woke up. Her side of the closet was empty, and her favorite coffee mug was missing from the kitchen. The house felt colder, emptier, like she'd taken more than just her belongings when she left. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the space where her suitcase had been, and for the first time since this all started, I let myself cry. I wasn't just mourning her leaving. I was mourning the life we'd built together, the future we'd planned, and the man I thought I was when we said, I do. The days after Monica left were some of the loneliest I'd ever experienced. I'd thought the house felt quiet before, but now it was oppressive. The sound of her laughter, the faint hum of her favorite shows playing in the background, even the way she hummed when she cooked, it was all gone. At first, I tried to keep busy. I buried myself in work, staying at the office long after everyone else had gone home. I told myself it was productive, but really, I was just avoiding the empty house. One evening, about a week after Monica left, I got a call from Sarah, one of her friends. We'd always been polite to each other, but we weren't close, so her calling me felt odd. Hey, Ethan, she said hesitantly. I wanted to check in. How are you holding up? I frowned, shifting the phone to my other ear. I'm fine, I said, even though it wasn't true. Why? There was a pause on the other end. I don't know if I should be telling you this, but I saw Monica the other night. At a bar. She was with a guy. Her words hit me like a brick to the chest. A guy, I repeated, my voice hollow. Yeah, Sarah said softly. I wasn't sure if you knew. I thought you should. Who was it? I asked, my jaw tightening. I don't know, she admitted. But they looked close. I thanked her for telling me, though the words felt mechanical, like I was on autopilot. When I hung up, I just sat there, staring at the wall, trying to process what I'd heard. Monica had been gone for barely a week, and already she was out with someone else. Was it Greg? Or someone new? Did it even matter? That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with images of her laughing, smiling, holding someone else's hand. The next morning, I decided I couldn't keep living like this. I needed answers, needed to know the truth, even if it hurt. I called Monica, and to my surprise, she picked up after just a few rings. Ethan, she said, her voice cautious. What's going on? I need to ask you something, I said, my throat tight. And I need you to be honest with me. There was a pause on the other end. Okay, she said finally. What is it? Are you seeing someone? I asked, the words coming out sharper than I intended. Monica didn't respond right away, and the silence felt like a weight pressing down on my chest. Ethan, I didn't want you to find out like this, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. My stomach dropped. So it's true, I said, my voice trembling. It's not what you think, she said quickly. It's not serious. Just what? I interrupted, my anger bubbling to the surface. Just needed someone to talk to? Someone to make you feel seen? She sighed, and I could hear the guilt in her voice. Ethan, I didn't mean to hurt you. I've been so lost, and I needed something to help me feel alive again. Her words were like a knife to the heart. And I wasn't enough, I said, my voice cracking. It's not about you, she insisted. This is about me, about what I need. I laughed bitterly. Funny how what you need always seems to come at my expense. Ethan, please, she said, her voice pleading. I never stopped caring about you. But you stopped loving me, I said, my chest tightening. Didn't you? There was a long silence, and when she finally spoke, her voice was so quiet I almost didn't hear her. I don't know, she admitted. I hung up without saying another word. For the first time since Monica left, I realized that whatever hope I'd been holding on to, whatever part of me believed we could fix this, was gone. She'd already moved on, even if she didn't want to admit it. And maybe it was time for me to do the same. In the days that followed, I felt like I was caught in a fog, moving through my life without really being present. Every time my phone buzzed, I braced myself, half hoping it was Monica apologizing, asking to come back, and half dreading another blow. But she didn't call. I stayed late at work every night, pouring myself into projects I didn't care about, trying to distract myself from the gnawing emptiness. Even my co-workers started to notice. "You okay, Ethan?" one of them asked as we grabbed coffee in the break room. "You've been working like a man on a mission lately." "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "Just trying to stay busy." But the truth was, I wasn't okay. It all came to a head one evening when I found myself sitting in the living room, staring at a photo of Monica and me from our honeymoon. We were standing on the beach, the sunset casting a golden glow over everything. I was smiling, my arm around her waist, and she was laughing, her hair blowing in the wind. Looking at that picture, it was hard to believe we'd ever been so happy. I didn't notice the tears streaming down my face until the phone rang, jolting me out of my thoughts. I wiped my eyes quickly and picked up, seeing an unfamiliar number on the screen. "Hello," I said, my voice hoarse. "Ethan, it's Sarah," came the hesitant reply. I frowned. "Sarah. Hi. What's going on?" "I wasn't sure if I should tell you this," she began, her tone careful, "but I thought you'd want to know. I saw Monica again last night. With him." I didn't need to ask who him was. "They looked serious," Sarah continued. "Like more than just friends. I thought you should hear it from someone who cares about you." "Thanks," I muttered, though the words felt hollow. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing. I didn't feel anger, or sadness, or even betrayal. Just a numb kind of acceptance. The next day, I called a lawyer. "Are you sure this is what you want?" he asked as we went over the details of filing for divorce. I hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. But then I thought about Monica, about the way she'd looked at me the last time we spoke, her eyes filled with pity instead of love. "Yes," I said finally. "It's what I need." The process was slow and painful, each step feeling like another piece of my life was being stripped away. Monica didn't fight the divorce. In fact, she barely responded at all. She signed the papers quietly, without argument, and we agreed to split our assets evenly. The day we finalized everything, I walked out of the courthouse feeling like I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. That evening, I sat on the back porch with a beer, staring at the fading light of the sunset. For the first time in months, I felt a strange sense of peace, like I could finally breathe again. Losing Monica hurt more than I thought it would, but holding on to something that had already died was killing me. I didn't know what the future would look like, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to find out.